meeting, first showing that you run across someone, if you don't have them in the office, if you're meeting them somewhere, that you put this in their hand, you explain to them the Real Estate Commission's regulation regarding agency, that it's my responsibility to explain that to you, and you have a choice of how you get to work with an agent. We're not going to go into that today because I'm just meeting you here to show you this house, but as we go forward and research other property for you and show you other property and we find that house that you're looking for, then we'll address that agency agreement at that point. It's kind of like throwing your hat in the door first before you walk in, you know, you just kind of give people an early warning that this is what we're going to do. That way you're not sitting down at the time that they found the house, writing a contract and say, oh, by the way, I need you to sign this. Giving me permission to be your agent. Well, that's a little late. So as best you can, get that in front of them before you ever get to contract time. So we were going down through this, I think we stopped on duration, right? I said that typically 30 days is what I'm going to put in there and look towards extending it if we work longer than that. 30, 60, I'm telling you, most people are not going to bat an eye about whatever you put in there. Just don't put anything unreasonable unless the property they're looking for is unique, and then have that discussion with them. Just say, hey, Adam, what you're looking for doesn't exist even in the market today. It may come on the market as we begin to look, but those properties are rare. So it may take some time. So I'm going to put 6 months in here because I'm going to devote that much time, and it could take that long to find it. So just know that if it's unique property. Hey, if it's a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house, 1,600 square feet in Fayetteville, that's becoming a rare property, but it's by definition not a rare property. So. And then if you get pushed back, we talked about yesterday, somebody giving you grief about it, just refer them over to the buyer agency agreement, the buyer services guarantee, and say, you know, I understand we're just meeting one another for the first time, or we did a couple of days ago, now we're starting to look for property. I'm sure you want some assurance that we're going to be able to work together. Now, I'm going to do what you need me to do. And that we get along. And so for that reason, I'll do this guarantee. Put my money where my mouth is. And if we're not hitting it off, if you don't think I'm doing the job, with 1 day's notice, you can fire me. I use that term. You can fire me and go find somebody else. Because here's the truth of the matter. I don't want to work with somebody that doesn't want to work with me. I'd rather move on to someone else. And the other thing is, you don't want to work with someone who's toxic. Get rid of them. Get them out of your life. I watch agents struggle with that, new agents. There was someone that just emotionally beats them up all the time, and they just keep staying in it's, pardon my reference here, it's battered wife syndrome. They just won't move on. But what's going on is they're afraid to turn it loose because it may amount to something someday, right? And so they just plow more and more time into it, and they take that grief off of the client when in reality they should let them go and go find somebody else. You'd be working with 3 other people while you put up with that kind of nonsense. So I'll let you be the judge of that. But some point out there working with the client, you're going to remember this conversation this morning, and you're going to go, you know, I probably should do that. And I tell you what, it's a great feeling to let somebody go, to turn loose, to say, hey, you know what, Jeff, I've worked really hard for you trying to find what it is you want. I'm not sure that we communicate well with one another, so I think it's in your best interest that you just find someone else to work with and walk out. So, now, don't carry your feelings around on your sleeves to the point that you're firing everybody that you work with, because they're not always going to be your best friend. But you know the toxic people, so don't put up with it. We did get past this because we were over to selling firms fee, right? And we explained that you're going to put 3% in there plus the 175. I talked to Kim about that, and first of all, did we talk about this? Yeah. That's 3%. And the reason we wanted 3% is that in a co-op situation, if we were to run across something, and what the reference that I made was a limited service broker. Some of them exist in this market, not a lot of them, you don't run into it much. But if they've got someone's property in the MLS and buyer agent fee is 1%, you don't want to work for 1%. But you want to take care of your client. So I tell Cameron, if you want to see it, if we run across this kind of situation, and it's property that you want to see, and you want to make an offer on it, and we negotiate it out to where we have an accepted offer, just know that, and I'll tell you that up front, if it's going to be a limited service broker, you'll know before we ever go. But if it's something that you want and we get it worked out, just know that the compensation from the seller is 1%, and my compensation is 3%, so you'd be making up the other 3%. Okay? But 99.9% of the time, that's not the kind of house we're going to be looking at. They just don't exist that much. Most sellers who try that get pretty fed up with it pretty quick. Because they got nobody in their corner. They just will be a fizz boat, is to do it that way. Agency representation, you got 2 options there. A says that the selling firm may represent both the buyer and the seller, and B says the selling firm may not represent both. We have a phone going off. That's a good reminder for me to make sure mine's off. It is. All phones off.
I have a question. Okay, so the only thing I didn't got any pushback on is where it says buyer shall pay, because they read that as, well, if it's for sale by owner, they're not going to pay, so they expect me to pay, so
Right.
they just don't like that phrase at all.
If you get that kind of situation, you can go to other paragraph. Which one is it in here? Is it 17? 15. Every year they switch these things around.
One thing actually made me write an email stating that we were not.
Yeah, you can put it right here. You can just, if you need to spell it out for them that they are not going, the only time that they will pay is if the seller's compensation is anything less than, and I would just say 3%. Now, if you end up, somebody's going to ask me this question, what about Washington County, 2.7? Ignore that. If you get into a situation, that's what your compensation is going to be, 2.7. You can just tell your buyer, hey, that's what I'm being paid and I'm okay with it. You're not going to have to make up any difference. This is really just aimed at that 1% limited service. Okay. So if you need to go to paragraph 15 and just spell it out for them, then spell it out for them. I agree with you. This is poorly written. And I am hoping that Risk Reduction Committee for Arkansas Realtors Association, not the Real Estate Commission, we don't write the contracts, does something about that this year. Because it's not clearly worded to where someone could read it and really know what the intent is. Okay, agency. You're always going to check age. You don't want to work with someone who tells you, no, I just want you to represent me as the buyer. Never in a dual agent situation. Because if you do that, how does that limit you? Yeah. All CB HMF properties are off the table. Can't show it. If you've got a listing, can't show it, can't show any of the others, because the only listings you'd be able to show as a purely buyer's agent would be some other company's listing. And so to get in that situation, that then leaves the door open for that buyer, once they've seen everything that's out there that somebody else has listed, to now jump ship, find another agent and double back and look at Coldwell Banker property. So you need to be able to explain this in such a way that they understand that there's really not an advantage for them. So let's go through that real quick. Why would Jason want me to be purely a buyer's agent? If he's a buyer, what does he sense is the advantage in me never being a disclosed dual agent representing both the buyer and the seller?
Because you're only working for him.
No conflict.
Conflict, how?
Interest.
Where would conflict come up?
Higher, so you get a
For
higher.
negotiations.
By wanting the high price to be higher than he pays, so that you get a higher commission.
That would be the case anyway.
Do what?
That would be the case anyway.
It's in the negotiation process.
Those are all thoughts that a buyer might have about that. They're all bogus. If I'm representing Jason and Matt's the seller and Jason's the buyer. What I'm going to tell Matt on the front end, if he even asks a question about this, which they're not going to do, the person who's going to do this is your analytical. So if you run into a CPA or an engineer or people who just analyze everything, those are the people, or people who spend way too much time on the net researching everything. So it's rare that anybody even asks a question about it. But if Jason were that engineer with the belt and suspenders, because that's the kind of person it is, you know, they take no chances about anything. So when they get up in the morning, they put the belt on and the suspenders just in case. And so if Jason's that person, he's going to say, wait, I understand that it's really better for me if I have an agent who only represents me. And I tell him, hey, Jason, I understand why on the surface that it may appear that way, but that's really not the case. And here's the reason why. For one thing, I have, even in a dual agent situation, and it's called disclosed dual agency, which means I tell you ahead of time, I tell the seller ahead of time. But in a disclosed dual agent situation, I have the same obligation to be fair and honest in my dealings with you as I do with Matt. No difference. Because in that situation, I represent both. But even if I only represented you, I still have, as a licensee, the same obligation to be fair and honest with Matt, even though he's not my client. I just don't technically represent him, I represent you. But here's the misconception that people have, that, hey, if I only represent Jason, I can find out information about the seller, I can find out information about the seller's situation, and I can pass that on to Jason. Because in a disclosed dual agency situation, everything I know personally about Jason of a personal nature, I cannot disclose to Matt. And everything that I know of a personal nature about Matt, I can't disclose to Jason, right? It's disclosed dual agency, I represent both, so I draw the line in the middle. That information doesn't cross over that barrier. But in Jason's case, as the buyer that I'm working with, anything I know of a material or pertinent nature about the property, I can tell Jason. I just don't disclose anything I know about Matt to Jason and vice versa. So, example of that, if Matt's listed with our company and I'm working with Jason as the buyer, and I know that Matt is 30 days away from his house, going on the courthouse steps to be sold at auction, I don't tell Jason that. That's a personal issue about Matt. By the same token, if Jason has been transferred here and it's about 30 days before school starts and he's moving from Ohio and he's trying to get his kids here in a house before school starts, and so he's got that urgency and is in a rush, I don't tell Matt that. Those personal things about each of those clients, I don't share with the other. So here's the thing. Jason will believe that because I'm representing him only as a buyer's agent, that those kind of things I know about Matt, I can tell him, right? If Matt's not my personal listing, let's say that it's Arena's listing, what am I likely to know about Pat or Matt to begin with? Nothing. So the advantage that someone believes that they get by having an agent who only represents them in the transaction is just bogus. I'm not in a dual agency situation. I have an obligation to represent both of them equally. So I don't try to position Jason in a position above Matt because I represent both of them. But I don't do that anyway. Here's the thing that, and you'll see it in this market, every market probably, where a buyer's agent, let's say I'm working with Jason and I'm showing him a Lindsay listing that Matt's listed with Lindsay. They take on this guns blazing, slash and burn approach to trying to get a deal done for Jason. Well, let me share something with you. If a deal is not a win-win, it never happens. It won't come together. If both sides can't feel like they got at least close to what they wanted and they needed, you're wasting your time. So to be this aggressive advocate for your client in the face of the other client, it just doesn't work. And so you have to have that conversation. You have to be careful about how you have it sometimes with Jason to, Matt's house is listed at $200,000 and Jason wants to make a $140,000 offer. In this market? Really? And so I need to have that conversation with Jason, even though I'm only a buyer's agent. I need to educate him about the market. I need to go to MLS and pull stats on properties in that price range, what list price to sale price ratio is, and educate him that that's probably not going to fly, Jason. I mean, if that's the offer you want to make, we'll turn it in, but let me tell you up front, I don't think it'll go anywhere. That's easy to do when I'm just Jason's agent. If I'm a disclosed dual agent, you got to be careful with that because Jason may start to interpret that, well, hey, you're representing the seller more than you're representing me. No, I'm trying to help you get a deal done. And a deal in this market is going to have to be market value or it's not going to come together. Matt's not an idiot. He's not going to give his property away, just like you wouldn't give yours away. So, like I said, I probably dove into that a little deeper than I intended, but those are sort of fine line things that you've got to watch if you are a disclosed dual agent, that I make sure in all the conversations that I have with Jason that he understands that I'm on his side, that I'm trying to get a deal done for him. I'm not on the seller side. I'm not on just his side. I'm trying to help two parties put a deal together. It's one of the reasons why the legal profession has such heartburn with the fact that we do dual agency, because attorneys can't do that, right? Fred couldn't come to me as an attorney wanting to file suit against Kama, and Kama come to me and ask me to represent her. It's conflict of interest, right? I can't both represent Fred in suing Kama and defend Kama at the same time. The reason is that that's an adversarial relationship between those two parties. A buyer and seller is not an adversarial relationship. Although people try to make it one sometimes, but it's not. And like I said, if you can't get to the end of the day and both people feel they got close to what they want, one or the other is going to walk away. And so, how have I represented Jason if I'm loud and boisterous and talking trash about the seller and about the seller's agent if at the end of the day we don't get a deal done? How's he benefited? Yeah, I haven't done my job in trying to help him. So have that conversation on the front end when you're showing, when you get a buyer that is about to make an offer on a listing that belongs to our company, to say, hey, I just want to remind you, Jason, remember in the beginning when we were talking about agencies, and in the state of Arkansas, I can represent the buyer, seller, or disclose dual agency. Well, in this situation, that's what that's going to be. But let me assure you, I'm taking care of you. I'm just not sharing anything with you of a personal nature that I might know about the seller, although I don't know anything about the seller. But your assurance is I'm not sharing anything with the seller about you either. This is purely trying to negotiate a contract. And especially if it's not a listing that I took, that somebody else in the room took that listing. I don't know anything about them, and I'm not going to be the one delivering the offer to that seller. It'll be the agent who took the listing. So I'm trying to communicate your best interest to that agent so that that agent can convey that to the seller when they deliver your offer. If I said that to you, would you feel at ease about it? And people do. Okay. So you just got to ask yourself, I would never work with a buyer that says, no, I just want you to be a buyer's agent. The only time I would is if they already know which property it is. If they've already identified and they want to go see it and they want to make an offer on it, and it's not our listing, I'll do that. But if it's a buyer that just coming into the market, they don't know what they want to buy, they want to get out and look, then I'm not going to waste my time trying to shy away from, listing wise, if we're not number one, we're a close number two as far as listings in the marketplace. So if you block out everything we have, you're pretty limited. You know, you could probably do this if you were XYZ real estate with 3 agents in the office. Wouldn't be a problem. Not likely you're going to double back on your own listing. Okay. Expired agency conditions, this is pretty much the same as in the listing agreement. It just says that if I'm working with CAMA, anything that I showed to CAMA during the term of this agreement, if it expires and she were to double back and buy the property, I'm still entitled to a commission. Okay. 60 days? 30 or 60. If you use 30, here's the deal. If you use 30 or 60 as the duration of this agreement, then I'd stick with 30. Because in the listing agreement, we were 6 months, and I said you could go to 60. But I wouldn't make it a number or a term larger than what you started the contract at. Okay, cancellation. Over on the right-hand side, there's a blank. And cancellation on this is the same as it was for the listing agreement. That the notice has to come from the buyer by certified mail, and cancellation is 7 days following. So what I'm going to put in there is 3%. You can just ignore the dollar signs. I need to get that out of there. 3% C number 15. So just type that in there whenever you're doing your, if you're doing it with point simplicity or handwriting it. 3%, C number 15. Or you can simply, an easier way to do that is just say C paragraph 15. And then in paragraph 15, you would say 3% of any purchase subject to buyer services guarantee. And so that's when I come back and explain to CAMA that I'm going to do a guarantee. Put my money where my mouth is. If you don't think that we're getting this done, but all that 3% is for is if you cancel this agreement, or if you not cancel the agreement, because we know how you have to cancel it other than the buyer services guarantee. You have to do it by certified mail and 7 days later. That's not how these things you get violated if they get violated. The way they get violated is CAMA is bopping along on a Sunday afternoon and driving down the street, sees an open house and stops and goes in and the agent knows how to do things, and Campbell falls in love with the house, and the agent says, hey, the seller's going to be back here in about an hour. I can get you a quick answer on this. You want to just make an offer on it while you're here? Does Kama think about Derry as her agent at that point? I used the purchase of a car yesterday. If you went into a dealership looking at a new car and the salesperson helped you and you drove it and you liked it and you thought, I want to think about it, and you go home and you come back 2 days later and you're mindful enough to ask for that salesperson, they tell you, well, he's off for the next 3 days. Do you wait 3 days to buy the car? No. And you're a real estate agent and you know better, right? But that's what we would do. You would say, hey, partner, I asked for you. You weren't here. You were off. And so you go ahead and buy the car. Kama's going to do the same thing. She sees the house. She's not thinking about this agreement. She's just thinking, hey, this is the house. I don't want to lose it. Agents here right now, they can write it up. And so that's how this would typically happen, where that 3% would apply, that she buys the property outside of this agreement. It would be 3% of that. But yeah, did we go to court over these? Yeah, whatever. Again, I explained it yesterday. It is setting a boundary. It's saying to Kama, because most people will, the light will go on. They see the house, and but you know, part of what Derry should have done with Kama to hedge against that, to insulate that kind of situation. Anyone have a suggestion? How could Derry have prevented Kama from doing that?
You see this house, call about any open
Let's go one at a time. What?
Let her know, like, if you see an open house that you like, just go take a look at it, just give me a call if you're interested.
Let me know. Just let me know. Give her a second to business.
We follow this together.
Stay with her.
Derry, and starting to work with Kama, says, you know, there'll be times when we have appointments and we'll be out looking at houses, but there'll be other times where you'll just be on the web and you'll see things, or you might drive down the street, and I'm going to give you an app so that if you're driving down the street, all you got to do is pull the app up and it'll show you that property that's on the market, and you can open it up, see photographs and details, and so you might run across one like that. Or you might just be coming home from church on Sunday and see an open house and want to see it. Please understand, if that's the case, just pick up the phone and call me and I'll meet you. Well, they think, I don't want to bother Derry on a Sunday, right? I don't mind bothering you the rest of the time, but I don't want to bother Derry on Sunday. It might not even be something that I like anyway, so it's here, it's open, I'm just going to go in. So what Derry does on the front end is just say what I said. You're going to encounter other properties other than the times that we're together looking at property. So here's a stack of my cards. And if you are ever in a situation, because I know you're going to feel like you're inconveniencing me, you're not. If you see an open house and you want to see it, let me know. We'll go see it. But if you happen into an open house, of course the agent's going to approach you and want to work with you. Just give them my card and say, I already have an agent. Here's his card. I want to look around. If I like it, I'll contact him and we'll make an offer. They'll drop her like a hot potato. They will. Ethically, they have to. They cannot continue once she says, I have an agent. That leads to another issue, that when she comes in the door of the open house, if it's my open house, and she's Derry's client, and she comes in, my conversation with her at some point early on is going to be, are you working with another agent? I'm going to find out. Because if she says, oh yeah, I've got a card here, and she gives it to me, I'm going to help her, because, hey, most of the time it's my listing, right? I want to get it sold. I'm going to help her, but I'm not going to try to get her to write a contract with me. I'm going to respect the other agent's position in this. And by golly, I'm going to expect the other agent to do the same when the roles reversed, and we will go after them. And we do. We had a situation just here a couple months ago. It took about a month to get it done. But we had an agent who had shown this property and actually written an offer on it twice. They kept lowballing it and they didn't get it. And eventually someone else made a decent offer and bought it, but the deal didn't go through. The buyer couldn't get financing, so when it came back on the market, our agent called the buyer back and said, hey, it's back on the market. If you want to make an offer, but here's the deal. You're probably going to have to get close to full price. And they responded one time in text. When did it come back on the market? And then they went dark. And a week later, it happened to be our listing too. Their agent in office. An offer comes floating in for full price from that buyer. My agent had a buyer agency agreement. She had shown the property. She had written an offer twice. And this person realized, this buyer realized that, hey, there was somebody that the family knew that had a real estate license, so let's just write an offer to them. And so I contacted the broker and I said, here's the deal. We're procuring cause on this. Write the check. Oh, no, we can't do that. And I said, okay, I'm going to file an arbitration. And just so that you know, in an arbitration hearing, they do not split the baby. I mean, that may be a horrible thing. But if you know the biblical story, you understand what I'm saying. They don't divide it. If you go to arbitration, arbitration comes down on one side or the other, and whoever is the prevailing party gets all the commission. And so I told him, I'm going to take it to arbitration. And I've actually chaired arbitration hearings in the past. And so there's this checklist, about a 2-page checklist that you go down through and say, did this agent have this advantage or did the other agent have it? And you just go down through and check them. Well, Lord, all of the check marks fell out on our side, and I just scanned it and sent it to him. I said, pick your poison. If you want to go to arbitration, we'll schedule it. And I actually turned it in to the state association. They were setting time for it, and then finally the broker called and said, I don't think this is fair, but we're going to send you a check. Well, I don't care whether it's fair or not. And we got the money. We're just not going to be pushed around. We're going to expect people to do what we do.
So when that situation happens, the agent that violated it, do they go ahead with the sale and the process inspection, all that, and run the deal to the end? So they got to do all the work with it, no payout.
That's right. And that's the penalty you get for being a bubblehead. Because the first thing that agent should have done is said, are you working with another agent? And that broker tried to play that off, that, well, he didn't know that. He asked the question and they told him no, that they weren't working. In another email that he sent to me, he referenced that my agent wished that he had picked up the phone and called your agent when he first started working. I said, well, how could that be if he didn't know there was another agent? You told me one thing in one email, now you tell me something else. So, if you want to get up in front of an arbitration panel and tell those kind of stories, have at it. But you're in trouble right now. So anyway, we got it. And that's just the most recent one. We've done them before. I will tell you that we have not had to go to arbitration because I could usually cut this short of that. They get the light. It goes on. But if companies don't do that, you just lick your wounds and go on. We're not going to do it.
So what kind of contingency plan do you give your buyer if you're like, Friday, I got plans, you won't be able to reach me, brain surgery, doctor won't wake me up. You decide you want
You're
to
talking that as an agent?
Yeah. So you're like, you decide you want to write an offer, but you can't reach me. What is the contingency plan that you give?
Well, what would you do? What would the rest of you do?
Right.
Huh?
Agent office.
Get an agent to cover for you. You go on vacation, you don't have to have brain surgery. You go on vacation, you're out of pocket. But even on vacation, I don't know that I would tell a client I'm on vacation, because you got your phone with you. You can write contracts. You can e-sign. You can be laying in a chaise lounge on the beach. They don't have to know that because they're a little resentful that you might be having a good time because that's not your job. Your job's to be at their beck and call, right? Yep.
I can tell you from the past that if I wanted to sell a house, the best thing to do would be to go on vacation, because it seems like the only time things
Yeah, your schedule loads up if you're trying to get out there.
If you do have to do that and have another agent cover for you, you pay them a referral fee or how does
That's
that work?
between you and the agent. And we have different situations in the office. There'll be situations in the office where two agents will get together and agree that, hey, when I'm gone, you cover for me. When you're gone, I'll cover for you. And it's just pro bono. There's no charge. But you got to be careful when you do that, that you're locking up with an agent who does similar business to yours. That you're not maybe hauling one buyer a month, and that agent is a $15 million a year producer. You're going to work your butt off every time they're gone, and they're not going to do much every time you're gone. Or they're gone a lot, and you're not gone much. So if you're going to do that kind of situation, it should be somebody that is a friend that you like, not a last minute, hey, I can't find anybody else. Matt, will you do this for me? If it's that kind of situation, work out the compensation ahead of time. I'm going to repeat that. Work out the compensation and the contingencies ahead of time. Is it real easy for me to tell Pam, hey Pam, I'm going to be gone for a week. Here are the buyers that I'm working with right now. If any of them want to see property and you show it to them and write a contract, of course I'll take it all the way through closing when I get back, but I'll pay you 25% referral fee. Okay, sounds simple enough, right? Well, what if one of those clients in the time that I'm gone calls Pam because they want to see property and they tie her up for 5 days, showing everything that is out there, and they don't write an offer, and I get back and I pick them back up again. And so she spent 4 or 5 days with these people, no contract, no referral fee. So talk about those contingencies. It's not just 25% if you write a contract. Hey, if you get out there and you know, you're working with one of my buyers and you spend more than a day or two with them and they don't write anything, when I get back, just for you babysitting and hanging on to them so I don't lose them, whatever they buy down the road, I'll pay you a referral fee. Talk about those things, because it's not just simple black and white. If somebody buys, I'll pay you. But by all means, do it up front. We had one where the deal turned into $1 million transaction, and they hadn't even talked about compensation, other than, hey, you know, I'll take care of you if somebody buys. Well, that's simple enough if it's a $150,000, $200,000 house. If it's $1 million piece of property, that's another matter. And because there was no discussion, the agent who picked them up and worked them and wrote the contract felt like they deserved more than 25%, but they hadn't talked about it. All right. We covered that special conditions, right? Buyer services guarantee. If there's continued pushback about that, then I'll go ahead and we're talking about referencing the cancellation.
Sure.
Yeah, no, that is the answer to it. That buyer services guarantee. Earnest money, we talked about that. Fair housing, we talked about. Buyer warranty and representation. This is the similar paragraph that was in the listing agreement, only it's much shorter in the buyer agreement. It says those A, B, and C inform at all times of initial contact all prospective sellers and their agents with whom the selling firm has contact pursuant to buyer agency agreement. Disclose the buyer's identity to third parties without prior consent. Well, third parties would be like a appraiser or lender or whoever else needs to be involved. Present, negotiate, and sell property submitted to the buyer to other prospective buyers. I don't go into this detail, but you need to understand that you have that right. And if a buyer were to ask that question, the answer is yes. Right. In other words, if I'm working with Luann and I've shown her half a dozen properties and there is one that just came on the market and it's going to be a hot property, it's not going to last And I've told her that when I show it to her. But Luann just can't make up her mind right now. She needs to think about it. She needs to go home and pray about it. Alyssa calls me because she's looking for similar property, and I say, hey, Alyssa, by the way, this thing just came on the market. You want to go see it? I've got every right to show that same property to Alyssa, even if I'm only a buyer's agent for both of them. And I'm going to tell Luann that when I show it to her. I say, hey, this is hot property, Luann, and I got other buyers that I'm working with. I've told you first here, or you found out about it. We got out there to see it. But not only are there going to be other buyers that are going to be interested in it, I'm going to work back through the list of buyers that I'm working with to see if anybody, because we don't need to lose this deal. So, as soon as you can make up your mind, we need to do something.
But if that other person wanted to make an offer, wouldn't you call me and say,
Yeah.
wanted to let you know
Yeah.
someone
Yes.
else is preparing to make an
It
offer?
wouldn't matter whether Alyssa made the offer or somebody from another company. If I become aware that there's another offer, I'm going to call any buyer back that I've shown the property to and say, hey, I told you this was going to happen. There is an offer right now, hasn't been accepted yet, as far as I know. Do you want to get an offer in there? Now, here's the thing. Some people will want to do that. Other people will not. Some people do not like to be in a horse race. And so if it starts to get crowded and there are multiple offers, they'll bow out. So don't always assume that because you think you can create urgency here because other people have an interest in it. Not always. Some people don't like that.
And going back to the car deal, the salesman's always going to tell you somebody else is waiting to buy this car.
Yeah.
So they could think that you're trying to
Right.
push it as well.
Well, I'm going to tell them that regardless of what they think. Hopefully we're not on that same level as a car salesman. But here's the thing about that kind of comment from car salesman. Are there other cars? Yeah. And they're all, we can get them all alike. You can pick your color. Maybe they have to bring it from one lot to another, but yeah, you can still get the car. But this particular house sitting in this location at this price, it may be months before you see something like this. So all I'm going to tell her is, hey, if you want to get an offer in, let me know. But I am, and here's how I'm going to move off of that. But I am going to call back through other buyers that I've been working with, because somebody's going to want this house. Yes.
So, I'm trying to think of how to phrase what I want to ask. So I've experienced a couple times with certain agencies and agents that they always, every single time you submit, they come back to you and say, I have multiple offers. Is there any kind of ethics violation for lying? If there's
Well, yeah, there is for lying. Now, how are you going to prove it?
Yeah, but just be aware that you start to realize who are the culprits that are
Well,
constantly.
and that's going to be your charge anyway. You're going to know who the bad actors are in this business and the ones who get it right. And you're going to take care of your client. So even if you got to deal with the bad actors to do it, you're going to do it. It's just refreshing when you get to do a deal with somebody that you know takes care of business the right way and will pull their end of the load. And so we get those comments all the time. Other agents will say, hey, I just love doing a deal with Coldwell Banker. Because they understand that they can count on the people here. By the same token, you'll hear people say, I hate doing a deal with that organization. It's never fun. They make it difficult. If you know it's a lie, but you don't, as a buyer's agent writing a contract on another property, another company, they don't have an obligation to prove to you the other offer.
So how do you school or coach your client then by when you have a good strong feeling that there's not multiple
You
offers?
don't want to get into that because you don't know. It's a feeling. Keep feelings out of this.
Okay.
If you knew it for sure, That's an ethics violation. But, and how does that benefit the buyer? If I tell Adam, hey, I think they're lying to me, I don't think there's another offer, do you think now it creates the suspicion about everything he's gonna do going forward? Yes. In fact, almost to the point that he may suspect things that you do. So, yeah, don't get into anything that is degrading of the other agent. If you know it, you think it, you feel it, you believe it, keep it to yourself. It is not germane to the transaction. I see agents from other companies, I hear about it, where they just browbeat the opposing agent. They'll say, you know, I'm having a difficult time here. They never call me back. I text this information over to them. I don't get calls back. And so they think it puts them in better light with their client to reinforce that, hey, I'm doing all that I'm supposed to do, and the other agent just is dropping the ball. Well, it doesn't. How do you feel most of the time when somebody is telling you bad stories about another individual? Make you feel uncomfortable? Mm-hmm. Yeah, most people it does. Okay.
I have a question.
Yes.
Let's say that there is a house, $1 million, and there are 5 offers.
Okay.
Okay? Now, one is less than 1 million.
Okay.
Another
I think
is...
you're going to get into such a strange scenario.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to me about it at the break.
No, for example, in New Jersey, no, you see houses that cost, the listing price is 1 million.
Okay.
Eventually they sell the particular house in 1 million, maybe with 20,000 or 50,000 more than the listing price.
Okay.
How did you deal with your client to offer more than the other? Is the owner rejecting all the offer until he finds the correct price for that particular house? How it is going to be deal?
To get your buyer, let me finish. Mm-hmm. To get your buyer to offer more than list, is that what you're asking? Mm-hmm. You just tell them, hey, you're competing. You're in a horse race here.
Okay.
And so if you want it, probably with that many offers on the table, it's going to sell for more than list price. Mm-hmm. But here's your safety net. You heard me say this before? What's the safety net? Appraisal. It's got to appraise. So if it's offered at $1 million and you want to throw $1,050,000 on the table to make sure that you get it, and try to make sure you get it, and run the rest of the competition off, do it. Because it would have to appraise for $1,050,000. If it doesn't appraise for that, then you have 2 options. You either get to walk away, or the seller would need to renegotiate to where the appraisal is.
The thing is that here we are dealing with cash price. Everybody's
we can still get an appraisal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but
everybody aware of that?
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I just lost a deal about a week ago. A friend of mine, because he was paying cash for commercial lot, but he wanted it appraised, and it didn't appraise, and so he walked away. So just because they're doing cash, you have to write it in the contract though, because on cash it doesn't reference an appraisal. You would have to say this offer is contingent on property appraised and for no less than purchase price. Okay, so let's move on. We covered earnest money, fair housing, buyer warranty, closing protection letter, assignment by the buyer. I don't know why in the world this is in here. You would understand why in a contract you would have a stipulation for assignment. In other words, Matt makes an offer on a piece of property, and it says Matt and or assigns, giving him the ability to, once he's negotiated a contract, to assign it over to someone else. You would never assign a buyer agency agreement. So ignore it. Special conditions, we've addressed some of the things that would be in there. Safety, we've talked about, limitation of responsibility, severability, hire agreement. See, these are all the same things, paragraphs that show up in that listing agreement. And I think we pretty well covered the kind of objections or pushback that you would get from a client in this buyer agency agreement. Part of it would be that commission statement that's in there. Like Stacy said, if you really get some pushback about that, just get over to paragraph 15 and write it out so that it's clear. The agent agrees to accept whatever is being paid through the MLS or buy or for sale by owner. And the only time this would apply would be if the buyer is, or the seller is paying zero commission or some drastically reduced commission. Then the buyer would make up the difference up to 30%. Don't get that wordy about it, but you understand what I'm saying. Okay? So the duration, how to get around that. The 175, we talked about that yesterday on the listing side of this, that if Stacy stops and says, wait a minute, what's the 175 for? I just tell her, Stacy, it's result based. If we don't find you a house and get it under contract, there's no fee. But what the 175 is for is to offset the increased cost of doing business. The kind of expense that our company has now for the tools and resources that are out there for buyers to be able to shop for property and for us to be able to market property for sellers. That's what it's for. So, and I always point out these contracts are from the Arkansas Realtor Association. These are total bankers. And so sometime back, the Arkansas Realtor Association decided, because of requests from real estate brokers, not to necessarily go up in a real estate commission, but just have incremental fees that would help offset the increased cost of doing business. So that's what it is. But again, Stacy, right? We do eye contact, right? Stacy. It's result. If we don't find you a house and get it under contract and get it closed, there is no fee. All right. Okay. Let's break early. Okay. Be back in here 5 after. They were on the. Okay. I think there's coffee and it's business. Is it done? Yes. All right. Grab the door for me, Terry. Next break because at noon I need to get this stuff over to.
Okay.
Already had an offer on it with a contingency with a release clause. Typically, house sale contingency. More times than not, that's what it is. And so somebody made an offer on that seller's property and said, I'll buy it, but I got to sell mine first. And so it has, and we'll get into that a little later on writing the contract, that if you're in that situation, typically that release clause is either 24, 48, or 72 hours. I would suggest to you that if you're representing the seller, you throttle that back to either 24 or 48 hours. It's a little difficult sometimes to get, in this market, to get that next buyer to sit still for 3 days waiting on the seller or that first buyer to give you an answer. But here's the deal. Most of the time, they can't take the contingency out anyway. If they could have done that, they would have made the offer that way to begin with. It wouldn't have been contingent on their house selling. But because they can't, and most people can't afford 2 mortgages simultaneously, right? They made the offer contingent on their house selling. So they're going to know as soon as they're notified whether or not they can pull the contingency out. So most of the time it doesn't run out that 72 hours. Usually within the first day, they're going to, of being contacted, they're going to say, I can't do it. In which case they just step aside and the second offer moves in the first position. Okay, and there's a lot of nuances about that we'll get into. All right, earnest money, we already talked about that, right? Same drill here. The reason it's in this packet is if your buyer is insistent on doing earnest money with the contract, but you know what? if I say, Jason, earnest money's almost gone away, most sellers don't expect it. In rare situations, we might get a counteroffer where the seller will come back and ask for it. If we do, we'll let it be the seller's call, but at this point, let's don't even include it in the offer. You think Jason's okay with that? Yeah, okay, I don't want to write an earnest check. But if the seller did come back in a counteroffer and ask for it, this is how it would be done. It would be on this form, it would come back with a counteroffer, and they would be asking for earnest money. And at that point, you could decide whether you want to do it or not. But the recommendation from me is that we don't do it with the offer. Now, on commercial property, it's expected. And so you will typically get it on commercial property, but not on residential. All right. So now we're down to real estate contract. There's another item in there that only applies to Washington County. Did you see this one? City of Fayetteville, Arkansas, actually only applies to the city of Fayetteville. Did you see that? One page, says City of Fayetteville, Arkansas. This is an ordinance that the city has, so it wouldn't apply to the rest of you. You can disregard it. So quickly to those who might sell property in, I shouldn't say it wouldn't apply to you because you could be a Bentonville agent selling something in Fayetteville, right?
Yep.
We do let you down here once in a while. When somebody leaves the gate open, you get in. We try to keep the gate shut. But what this is about is occupancy, and this really has more to do probably with the University of Arkansas than virtually anything else. And so what it says is that the city ordinance says no more than 3 unrelated people can live in a single-family home at any given time. 3 unrelated. And this probably came about because 4 guys will rent a 3-bedroom house and one will sleep on the couch and all 4 SUVs and pickups are up in the yard. And if you live in that neighborhood, you're probably not very happy about that. So it says no more than 3 unrelated. So they, you'll even, we'll see it up here, where parents will come in because junior's in school and they want to buy a 4-bedroom house. And put 1 in each bedroom, and by doing so, they're charging rent to the other 3, and it's making their mortgage payment, and junior stays here and goes to college for 4 years, and they accumulate a little equity in that house, and all they were ever out was the down payment and closing costs to buy it to begin with because the mortgage payment got made. And that's a great idea, it really is. But you got to break it off at 3. You can't put 4 in there, or 5 or 6 or however they want to bunk up. It's really disappointing to mom and dad when junior quit school after his freshman year. Now they got a house and junior doesn't have friends anymore, and they got to figure out what they're going to do with it. But there have been other families that I've worked with over the years that one kid would come to college and they would buy the house, and 2 years later the daughter would come and she would live there, and it would just cycle through, maybe 2 or 3 kids. So it is a great way to do it. But all this says is that if you've got a buyer and they're buying a house in Fayetteville, I'd have them sign this because it says that you made them aware of that ordinance, and they'll go, it's just me and my family moving in here. Well, I understand, but down the road you might sell it and sell it to someone who isn't using it for that purpose, and you've been made aware that this ordinance exists. The city of Fayetteville's got no authority over us to present this one way or the other. It's just the right thing to do. If somebody's going to buy a house in Fayetteville, they need to know that that ordinance is out there. Okay? Because what was happening with enforcement would go out when somebody complained and knock on the door, and what's the answer? I didn't know. Nobody told me. I read it from the landlord. He didn't say anything about it. So then they go to the landlord, and the landlord goes, well, I bought the house from Camus. You didn't say anything about it. So it's just this push back to somebody else. Kick the can down the road. Yes?
Okay, so if somebody specifically wanted to do that example that you gave with the 4 kids in the 4 bedrooms, you need to be looking for a home like in Farmington or Springdale or someplace.
Outside
So that
the
is
city
just,
limits,
that is
right.
only for Fayetteville, correct?
That's only fair.
Okay.
But here's the thing, if mom and dad have 2 kids that are coming to school, then you can do the 4-bedroom house and rent the other 2, because 2 of them are related. It's no more than 3 unrelated. So, years ago, before this ordinance was in place, before they were trying to enforce it, I had an attorney out of Russellville,